Hey guys, welcome to Mikey's Video Game Madness. Today we're playing Captain America Super Soldier on the PlayStation 3. This is a action-adventure platformer that takes place in World War II. It's based on, obviously, the Marvel Comics Captain America franchise, which it's actually based on the newer movie. So forget about that movie that came out in the 80s, which when I was a kid when it came out, I actually really liked that movie. I don't know if I'd feel the same way if I watched it now, but I think this is a really cool superhero game for the simple fact that, like the movie, it's a period piece, so even though it's a superhero game, it takes place during World War II, just like the movie. And I remember seeing the 80s movie and really liking it at the time, even though seeing reviews of it, even though I haven't seen the movie since I was a kid. Like, seeing reviews of it looks pretty bad, but I was burned out on a lot of these superhero movies that came out, not particularly the Marvel ones, but just, I don't know, like the Punisher movies, and I wasn't crazy about the Spider-Man reboots. The third X-Men movie was a letdown. The first Wolverine movie was kind of stupid. They were kind of going into bad video game movie territory, so I was kind of burned out. And then I think it was on HBO or something. It was on cable. I didn't pay for it or anything, so I remember seeing Captain America on there, and I was like, well, there's nothing else on. Let me check this out. And if you're not familiar with the character, like, Captain America, I believe, existed before World War II. Pretty sure, but he became like really popular during the World War II era. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not like a scholar when it comes to comics, but a lot of the comic book characters back then, like, were fighting on the Allies side, fighting like the Nazis and Hitler and stuff like that, and what better character to do it than Captain America. So I was really happy to see when I actually saw the movie that it was actually a period piece. They even diluted the color to like this sepia tone and all this stuff, and it was really cool. And this game is kind of a weird timeline where it takes place during the movie, but it's its own separate story. There's like, I haven't seen the movie in a while. I actually just recently picked up the first movie. Ironically, I don't plan on getting the Thor or the Hulk movies just because those characters didn't really appeal to me in comic book form, and Captain America didn't really either. Usually when I saw Captain America, he was like teamed up with somebody else or whatever. Like, because Captain America is kind of like Superman with like that goody two shoes, perfect, all American like attitude, like the same kind of morals that like your grandparents probably had, because he's sort of from their generation. So is Superman and even Batman, but Batman was kind of darker at the time, and then they lightened him up when the TV show came on. Like, after everybody came back from the Second World War, they got really strict with comics and that comic code and stuff, because they had like those Tales of the Crypt comic books and stuff like that. That's why you have weird things like Morbius, I don't think could be called like undead, which is like this vampire, and the Spider-Man universe, stuff like that. You couldn't have like the undead, and everything was super like sanitized and everything, so they had to try to find creative ways to get around that code. But anyway, I was happy to see it was a period piece, and it was actually a good film, and the sequel was even good, and all the Disney owned, which I would never expect this to happen. Disney owning Marvel and actually doing good with it. I thought they were gonna make all the characters be all like super family friendly, nothing controversial or anything like that, and I'm so glad they didn't do that. I was also scared they were gonna do the same thing with Star Wars, but after seeing the Marvel movies, after waiting so long, like, I knew that Star Wars was gonna be okay. I know some people feel indifferent about Star Wars, and that's perfectly fine, but I guess someone like me who grew up reading comics, and I still read comics from time to time, just not as often as maybe I did when I was a kid. They still appeal to me. I'm just, I don't know, like, more picky when it comes to comic books, even though I really like the movie adaptations of the comic book films. When it comes to actually reading comic books, I end up getting comics based on other things. I'm really cheesy when it comes to some, though. Like when they come out with a Ghostbuster comic book, which is if you're into Ghostbusters and don't mind reading comics, I would definitely check out IDW's Ghostbuster comic, which actually takes place after the video game. So they take what was established in the movies, the video game, and even some hints of the cartoon, but not too many. Like, the characters are definitely Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson. Although Janine doesn't look anything like Annie Potts, she looks more like Janine from the cartoon show, which is fine. I kind of liked that punk rock look Janine had going on, and she kind of had that look in Ghostbusters too. So maybe they were emulating the style from Ghostbusters too, but I like that. I'll pick that up every month. But I kind of like the indie comics and the darker comics and stuff like that. The offshoot of DC Vertigo comics, which you might be familiar with, the Sandman. That's probably the most popular Vertigo comics, and I think Watchmen was Vertigo comics. And I like the Batman graphic novels and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah. Way off track here, but anyway, I was saying that I occasionally enjoy reading comics, and I grew up reading comics, so when different writers and artists and stuff are involved, I'm used to that. So even though if the original creator isn't involved, as long as the source material is good or enjoyable in some way, I don't mind it too much. And I know the original Star Wars movie retracked a lot of stuff from A New Hope, but I almost feel like in some ways that was like a necessary evil to kind of gain back some of the people that gave up on the franchise for the prequels. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I feel like it was the only way to get those people's attention. And even though you want to tell a story, at the end of the day, it's about business. And to be honest, like, George Lucas is super creative and everything like that, but I mean, George Lucas always kept like the franchise and business portion of Star Wars in mind. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is go back and look at R2-D2 Cookie Jar. Part of the reason why those other films got to be made is not only because they were successful, but George Lucas had the insight and feeling like, if anything, if his film comes popular, it would be a merchandise powerhouse, and it was. So, you know, can't blame Disney too much on that part. But yeah, I mean, there was some original creative stuff. I think the characters were interesting and creative, and I really like the new characters, and I like the new spaceship designs, although there weren't as many of them as I would like. But it did give me a classic Star Wars vibe and felt new at the same time, like someone else was behind the camera. So I'm curious where the other two movies are gonna go. They'll be drastically different. I know I talk about Star Wars a lot in my last few videos. I guess it's on my mind. It's coming out in video soon, April 4th, I believe. And I'm excited, but the reason why Star Wars even came up was that Disney took over Marvel and then took over Star Wars. And what made me have faith in Star Wars movie was after I saw Captain America, and then I soon followed up with Iron Man and Iron Man 2. I think Iron Man 3 was still in the theaters at the same time. I don't know. Yeah, I think it was, because I think the Avengers was, I think Captain America, Iron Man 2, and the Avengers were the Marvel movies that were out on video at the time, and I was playing catch up, and I was like, wow, I was missing out on all this time. Because before that, the last superhero movie I really liked, and some people hate it, because they took a small little turn, or that they followed it too much in certain parts, as Watchmen, which I don't care what anybody says about Zack Snyder. I'm not a huge fan of his other films, but I absolutely love The Watchmen, but it's more because of the source material and stuff like that, and I know he took some stylistic turns and tone with that and stuff like that. They're supposed to be these average people, but when they're in fights, it's almost like they do have super powers, when Dr. Manhattan was supposed to be the only one with superpowers. But overall, I really liked the movie, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I recommend anyone seeing that, if they can get over some of the cheesy aspects that you'll get no matter how much you try with a superhero movie. They tried not to make it cheesy with the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, but again, I feel like a grown-ass man, and I'm a huge fan of Batman, by the way, a grown-ass man in a bat suit can only be taken seriously so much, and I think you kind of have to have a little bit of comic book flair to make these comic book movies work, and that's just something that I feel that's necessary to make a successful comic book movie, because comic book characters and movies are just going to look silly. I don't know what it is, maybe it's me, but I think other people feel the same way based on the criticism I heard of like some comic book movies. So yeah, you gotta honestly realize the material that you're dealing with. It is kind of silly that a soldier in World War II has superhuman strength and is fighting with a shield while everybody else has guns, you know. But I really like it. I like that you're not necessarily fighting Nazis. You're actually fighting an army that kind of defected from the Nazis and became their sort of like their own thing in a way. Like, I don't know how much any of you that are watching this, but there's evidence that the Nazis are very much into the occult and stuff like that. That's why games like Wolfenstein and stuff like that kind of took it up way higher than the actual reality of the situation was. But there was some aspects of that in actual real life and their crazy experiments and stuff like that. But anyway, there's like Hydra, and it's kind of like Wolfenstein, where they like took it up to like the sci-fi level with their experiments and messing with stuff from different worlds and stuff like that. And the German army and stuff like that wasn't too crazy about it, so they kind of defect and become their own thing. But yeah, it has a very Castle Wolfenstein feel. If Castle Wolfenstein was like a platformer, and I really like it. And the battle system's kind of like Batman, but not as fluid. Batman's a lot easier in the way that you can counterattack and stuff like that. This isn't, from what I've seen of the amount of collectibles you have. I haven't finished this game yet, so I don't really review games anyway, but I might in the future, but not today, not tomorrow, not anytime soon. But based on the amount of collectibles I've seen in the spots that haven't been filled out yet with the collectibles that I'm supposed to find, it doesn't look like it's a very long game. But for what it is, for a licensed game, it seems to have a lot to offer. The whole platforming segments, when you have to push X, seem a little bit more dramatic than they actually are. They're actually super slow pace. It's like push X and you push it, and he rotates around the pipe and then jumps, and then it says push X again. It's not really fast. It looks like you're pushing X really fast if you're just watching a video of it, but it's super slow. The combat's pretty simple. when you see those little lines on the screen, that's basically telling you to use your shield, and you can deflect bullets, and it's pretty fun. One thing about the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 generation, or some of you might just refer to it as the 7th gen, is that most of the games are 30 frames per second games. You occasionally get your 60 frames per second games with such games as Call of Duty or fighting games and stuff like that, but your average game will run at 30 frames per second. But I've noticed with the 8th gen, with games that run on 30 frames per second, they seem to run a lot faster, and that makes me feel like a lot of these games that are touted as 30 frames per second were probably lower, maybe like 25, and I feel like this game is kind of suffers from the lower 25 frames per second. It's definitely a little bit under 30 frames per second. The game is definitely functional, and it doesn't feel like it's ruining the game or your experience in any way. But if you're playing a game that's actually running at a solid 30 frames per second, because what I think happens with a lot of these 8th gen games is that they can technically run faster than 30 frames per second, but not quite at 60. So they'll v-sync the game, so it'll just be capped at 30 frames per second and just run ultra smooth. This kind of dips below 30 frames per second, and I think anything under 30 frames per second, it's just noticeable, especially if you're playing something that's consistently at 30 frames per second. It sticks out. I've been playing more PlayStation 4 lately than I have been PlayStation 3. I'm starting to change back to PlayStation 3 right now more, as you'll probably see some more PlayStation 3 games being recorded. Although I tend to like to record PlayStation 4 games just because they look so nice and they're easier to record. If the colors look washed out, that's because when I do PlayStation 3 recordings, and I've explained this in other videos, why not explain it again? We have some time to spare. With the PlayStation 3 videos, there's no like easy way to record HDMI like you can with the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 4, so you have to either have some bypass box or cable deal or whatever that bypasses the HDMI security. I can't ever remember when it's called when I do these videos, but I know in PlayStation 4, in order to record, you have to turn it off. PlayStation 3, you don't have an option, so what I have to do to get around it is record with component cables, and my recorder takes the component signal and then turns it back into a HDMI signal, and it looks awful. When sorry, I tried not to hiccup into the microphone. I was trying to be polite. But anyway, yeah, basically when I think the game looks great and all this stuff, and then I put in the little thumb drive that I recorded my video on, I see it on the computer and it looks awful, and I have to adjust the contrast and sharpness and stuff like that, and it's quite a chore. So these games I don't think games ever look as good as they do on the TV when you're recording, because YouTube will always compress your videos a little bit. That's why I highly recommend, if you plan on ever recording a video, record it in its highest settings. Even if you have a 720p video, render your video in 1080p. The higher that you render your video, the better and less compressed it's gonna look on YouTube. But anyway, so yeah, I have to go and resharpen everything and try to find the best contrast and brightness ratio. It's never gonna look as good as HDMI, and it's not gonna look as good as it looks in real life. I have better luck getting the PlayStation 4 games to look closer to what they look like in real life, but I never achieved that result. But I just enjoy recording on the PlayStation 4 just because it's so easy and the games look really nice. But there's not really much to say. Since it's a licensed game, obviously they probably had limited time developing it, but for what it is, it's really fun. The frame rate might throw you off a bit, but this is a problem I've been coming across, and it's not really a problem after you play the game for like 10 minutes or so. But it's a problem I've come across if you're used to playing 8th gen games that run at 30 frames per second and then go back to 7th gen. Some of these games just don't run as smooth, and it's not a deal breaker. It's just kind of distracting. Sorry, I can't talk today. And yeah, after a while you're fine. There's a ton of collectibles to get. It adds replay value, but really the only thing worth note, unless you get some special ending or something, I don't know that much about the game. I don't think you do. I think you probably just get a trophy or some shit that maybe if trophy collecting is important to you. That's great. You have these little mini games where you have to subtly push the wires together to create an arc. If you push them too close, the machine blows up and flings you backwards. This is fairly early in the game still. There might be other mini games, I don't know. But yeah, most of the combat is melee combat, and then whatever projectiles you have involve your shield, and then you have these super attacks. You can see your bar above the red life bar that's slowly filling up. Those are like for your super powered attacks, and that's for like the larger robotic like enemies. And Hydra, even though it's Hydra and they're an offshoot of the Nazis, they're clearly Nazis without swastikas, and I think that's just to make the game easier to it makes the game easier to get like a lower rating and to import to other countries and stuff like that, because I know for instance games like Sniper Elite, they don't use swastikas in their games, so they can get their games out to more countries, because you know some countries like Germany, the swastika I think is forbidden. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you come out with a game that's released in Germany, you can't have swastikas in it, if I remember correctly. Maybe they've changed that policy, I don't know, but I remember a lot of games released in Europe, because Germany was one of the countries that the games would be released on. They'd take a lot of the blood and violence out. I remember a lot of the Castlevania games, like Castlevania Bloodlines, suffered from major censorship because of that. And there's actually a level that took place in Germany too during World War I believe. So they had to censor that game. It's called Bloodline. I think in Europe, the Castlevania Bloodlines was called like the Next Generation or something like that. I get that one confused, and then the European version, I think, of Dracula XX, which is the Super NES version, was called Vampire Kiss. Anyway, they changed the name so it didn't sound gory or whatever, and took out the blood and stuff. But anyway, this is a good platformer. You could probably finish it in a few hours based on the content I collected. I haven't finished the game, so I can't tell you that for a fact, but based on all the stuff that I've already collected in a short amount of time, I don't think it's incredibly long, but it's not incredibly expensive. And I really like the movie, and if you watch the movie and want to know what happened during the montage sequence of him fighting in the war, this is where the story takes place. This kind of shows what happened during all his little adventures while he was being embraced more in the film, because the film didn't have enough time to show you everything, of course. So why not fit a game into the movie that fits into the movie's timeline, but it's its own thing? Because, you know, some licensed games you play and it follows the movie to a T, and you feel like you've already seen the movie. Like, Star Wars Episode 3, I remember playing that game. It came out before the film did, and it even had film clips in it, and it followed the movie to a T. So when I went to go see the movie on opening night, which was kind of cool, even though they accidentally showed the movie upside down when they first showed it. I don't know how they screwed that up, knowing how many nerds were, like, me included, were anticipating to see that film. But, you know, once the film came on, I knew, like, just about everything that was happening in the movie. So it's nice where they follow the movie, but they did something slightly creative where it's its own storyline, but it fits within the actual film's timeline. So what they did was show you all the adventures that was happening between, like, a small little 3-minute montage that was in the film. But yeah, this reminds me of like a platforming Castle Wolfenstein. The frame rate is a little bit distracting, but you get used to it, and that's an issue with a lot of games from 7th gen, that you're used to playing as 30 frames per second, but you quickly realize that a lot of these games didn't run that well. That's not the case with all 7th gen games, but you do notice it a lot, especially if you played a lot of PlayStation 4 or Xbox One games. I don't know if this is available for the PC, and there's other versions of this, but this particular version I know is available on PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. This is obviously the PlayStation 3 version, but the textures are really nice too. It definitely has an Unreal Engine 3 look to it. I'm not quite sure what engine it runs on. I don't think it's the Unreal 3 engine though, because usually they plaster that all in the beginning of the game, and I don't remember seeing it. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'm sorry I'm rambling. Today has been a busy day, and I really wanted to make a video, and again, my mind's just like here and there and everywhere else, but these videos are therapeutic to me, and I hope you guys understand, and I appreciate you guys watching my videos so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you on the next video. I hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye.
If you want to, like, comment, and subscribe! Thanks for watching!